So use our minds so we know our situation and purpose in life. Continuing from this, we know that purpose in life is the most critical question, because if you look at the state of the human being, he's been thrown into existence. It's like life could be like a huge factory, and you just wake up in this factory, all the windows are closed, the doors are closed, and people are just working. And you wake up, and what are you going to ask yourself? How on earth did I get there? How on earth did I get here? What am I supposed to do? And where am I going? These three fundamental questions you would ask if you woke up in a factory with the windows shut and the doors closed and people were just doing the work. Now, who is the intelligent guy? The one who's going to ask those questions and get answers, or the one who just gets up and starts working in the factory, just joining everyone else like sheep? Think about this. Who is the intelligent one? You just wake up into this factory. Say you go to sleep, you pray witr, you go home, you have something to eat, maybe have some tea, have some cha, have some pakora, have something, whatever you guys eat. Yeah? Then you go to sleep. Then you wake up in this factory. You're going to ask those questions. How on earth did I get here? Where am I going? What am I supposed to do here? But many of us, we just wake up in this factory and we start working like machines. We're no different from a robot. We're no different from a social, biological robot. Because this is very important. Because if you think about it, there's an American writer once wrote that your birth, my birth, our births, was like being born and then being kidnapped and then sold into slavery. Listen to what I'm saying. Your birth, Uncle G, your birth, Akhi, your birth, brother, Akhawat, sisters, your birth was like being born and then being kidnapped and then sold into slavery. Wallahi, that's the state of the human being. That is the state of the human being. Where even the kuffar, the non-Muslim philosophers, said that this was a concept called thrownness. You're just thrown into reality with no choice. Because you never chose that you're going to be a black man. Did you choose you're going to be black? No. Did you choose that you're going to be Kashmiri, Mirpuri, or whatever you are? Punjabi? Oh, Punjabi, yeah? Or whatever. You didn't choose this. Did you choose that you're going to be white? Did you choose that you're going to be gorgeous? MashaAllah, tabarakallah. Yeah? I never chose that I was going to be Greek that looks like a Pakistani. Yeah? But wallahi, think about this. Did you have a choice? You didn't even choose that you were going to be a man. Akhawat, sisters, you didn't even choose that you were going to be female. You had absolutely no choice. And by the way, you had no choice concerning your parents. No choice at all. Even your DNA, the biologists talk about that we have DNA. Even your DNA, you had no choice in your DNA, the thing that really shapes your biological makeup. No choice, zero, finished, khalas. And then we think we're free. And we think we're free. We didn't choose our parents, we had no choice. We didn't choose the socio-economic environment where our parents came from. We didn't choose the geography. We didn't choose our lineage. We didn't choose where we came from. We didn't choose our color, our gender, our size, our shape. None of these things. And we think we're free. And on a side note, sometimes we define ourselves by these things we had no choice over. Sometimes our tribe or our nationality is bigger and more important than Islam, which is called as-sabiyya in Islam, and it's haram. We can't take nationality over the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's nothing wrong with being proud where you come from. The Sahaba belonged to tribes and there was an element of halal pride, if you want to use that term. But to take it over the deen, this was as-sabiyya, haram totally. And there is even a very damning hadith that someone who takes their nationality over the deen, it's equivalent of biting their father's private parts. This is a hadith, check out for yourself. I'm not ashamed to say this. It's the words of the Prophet ﷺ, and many of you know this hadith as well, but you've been too scared to mention it. But we mention it because we're not afraid and we have to speak the truth. Because imagine if I took my Greekness over the deen, I would never become a Muslim. Because in Greece, they have this concept of Elinige Christianelae. In Greece, that means, in Greek it means the Greek Christian community. So being Greek and Christian is one and the same thing. If you change your religion, you're not Greek anymore. You become a traitor. Anyway, so the point, let's go back to the main point, which is we don't even choose our parents, our color, our gender, all of these things. Now let me just go a bit more further. Not only are we enslaved to this, because we have almost a slavery to this, because we had no choice. We also have a slavery to our own self. The carnal, bestial aspects of humanity. Our instincts, our animalistic drives. Many of us are slaves to our nafs. This is why one of the 11th century theologians, Al-Ghazali, and Ibn Taymiyyah wrote about this, and Ibn Taymiyyah's students wrote about this as well. They basically said, especially Al-Ghazali in his book, The Alchemy of Happiness, he basically said, you think that you know yourself. You think you know yourself. Because when you're hungry, you eat. When you're enraged and angry, you fight. When you have the passions, you make love. And you think you know yourself. You're no different from an animal. But the reality of yourself is in your inwardness, who you are. Your aqidah, your actions, your belief, your iman. But many of us are like these animals, and you see this in our country, in England. Go on to the town square on a Friday night. Go to Leeds, city centre, Bradford. You see nothing but fitna and fasad and chaos, right? Because these people, they're just reacting to the carnal bestial desires, right? Now don't judge them though. Because sometimes we do that. Look at me, I'm so great and pious. Look at the kuffar. This is not a sunnah, by the way. The sunnah is to feel sorry for them and help them and want to guide them and be there. And we want to bring them to us. Because in reality, when it comes to the layman, the awam, Joe Blogs next door, there is no such thing as us and them. You know this? And the reason we have these issues is because we adopt another social norm. So we're enslaved by the social masses, by the influentials in our culture. So look at this, what we've discussed. You didn't choose your parents, you didn't choose your biology, you didn't choose your society that you're enslaved to as well. You didn't choose social biological conditioning, you didn't choose your DNA, you didn't choose your gender, your color, your parenting, your lineage, your society, your nationality. You didn't, and we're enslaved to our nafs as well, to our carnal, bestial aspects of mankind. So we're slaves. We're slaves. This is it. The only real freedom you have if you shoot yourself. Honestly. Honestly, that's the only act of real freedom. Even the Western philosophers would write essays on suicide. Arthur Schopenhauer wrote an essay on suicide. David Hume, he wrote an essay on suicide. I think some of them really understood the only act of freedom is to kill yourself. That's the state of mankind without purpose. Forget the drink and the alcohol and the fun and games they have. You go underneath that, you scratch the surface, they're just slaves. We're all slaves. But how do we find true liberty? How does the soul, the ruh, how does it find liberty? And interestingly, the word ruh is linked to the word raha, which means serenity, liberty. And the only way to escape from this slavery is to become a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the real bloke. That's the real man. Not the man who's enslaved to his desires, the man who's enslaved to society, the man who's enslaved to things that he didn't even choose. SubhanAllah, we're so proud to be the chief of a tribe. You didn't even choose that. You're a slave to that. It's rubbish. Sometimes we're so proud because, you know, we have the geldam, yeah, as we say in Hackney. You know what I'm saying? Isn't it? But you're enslaved to your carnal desires. You're just like an animal. You're no different from the lion with many lionesses. Big deal. Wagwan. Yeah? Make it real. Let's make it youth. So you're just a slave? Oh, you think your hair looks nice, sister, yeah? Well, you're just copying so-and-so from the L'Oreal advert. You're just a slave to her. Really, you're just a slave. You're always going to be enslaved. But how do you free yourself from this stuff? By enslaving yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ubudiyya, as Ibn Qayyim said, the 14th century theologian and scholar of Islam. Ubudiyya, having a servanthood, a worship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because Allah transcends you. Allah knows Hamza better than Hamza knows Hamza. Allah knows Fatima better than Fatima knows Fatima. Allah knows Muhammad better than Muhammad knows Muhammad. Allah knows Aisha better than Aisha knows herself. And He created you, and He created everything that exists. So therefore He transcends that, so He knows what's better for you. So having that enslavement to Allah frees you and elevates you from the dunya, elevates you from enslaving yourself to your conditioning, the enslavement to your nafs, your ego, the enslavement to the things that you had no choice, the enslavement to your color, to your background, to your nationality, to social pressure, to the L'Oreal adverts, to everything. That is the true freedom. It's the paradox that your soul is liberated. The ruh attains raha. It has the same linguistic roots via the worship and enslavement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Subhanallah. You know, someone really realizing this, that no matter what I do, I'm going to be a slave to these ephemeral, empty things. Things of the dunya. Coming from the word adna, which means something lowly. Am I going to enslave myself to things that have hardly any worth? I'm going to enslave myself to the animalistic, instinctive desires of myself? I'm going to enslave myself to things I had no choice over, like my gender, like my parenting, like my society, like my nationality? Of course not. So how then do you escape these shackles? By enslaving yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And interestingly, what does Allah say about our purpose in life? That He created man and jinn illa liya'budun, except to worship Allah. It's the most important aspect of worship, of course, but worship is a comprehensive concept in Islam. It means obeying Allah, loving Allah, taking Him as your authority, and knowing Allah. Let me repeat: obeying Allah, loving Allah, taking Him as your authority, and knowing Allah. As Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu mentioned some of these things as well. So this is the ultimate act of liberation. This is the ultimate act of being a true human being. In my humble opinion, if someone knows this and they don't start worshipping Allah, how can you consider yourself a human being? How could you? In reality, you're no different from a piece of wood or this pen. It's made of carbon, you're made of carbon. What difference does it make? If you're just reacting to your just biological and physical nature, then you're no different from a pen. It obeys its physical nature. If you write, it works. Even a rat, a lowly rat, when it nibbles on decaying matter and it runs through the sewer, it's obeying its nature. It's enslaved to its physique, its materialistic biological reality. And if you just do that the same, well, what makes you different from a rat? What makes you different from a rat? That's why Allah says, nay, bal. Bal in Arabic is like saying, it's like a rhetorical, it's balaga, meaning they're not animals, bal, they're even worse than cattle. So someone who does this, as Allah in the Quran in Surah Baqarah says, they are worse than cattle. So do we want to be worse than cattle? Do you see the unique spin on this? Because we think when we move away from religion, we're actually free. We think when we move away from religion, we're free. When we move away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're actually free. But it's actually the opposite. When you enslave yourself to Allah, you remove the shackles of all of these types of slavery. So, how do we know this now? How do we know that this is actually true? We must worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Well, there's a few things we could articulate here. Let's talk about Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah talked about the fitrah. The fitrah in Arabic language comes from the root fatara. And you have words like fatrun and fatarahu. That Allah created something within you to acknowledge His oneness and worship Him. And if you really think about it, if you take away parenting, if you take away your conditioning, if you take away some biological aspects, if you take away and strip away all of these social effects as well, the fitrah will be there. And you could ask it a question almost. Who is your Rabb? And they know it's Allah. This is why even atheists on a sinking ship are no longer atheists. There's a famous saying, there is no atheist on a sinking ship. Wallahi. And this is not just a cop-out. This is actually a key intellectual argument. Because it shows the disposition, the natural disposition of man. Why are you calling out to something that you don't believe? If you look at the BBC archives of the Titanic, there was some survivors saying that although we didn't believe in God, our lasting word is praying to God. Wallahi. That was the only hope. And what does Allah say in the Quran? They remember Allah, they worship Allah, but when they get on the shore and they're safe, they forget Him. And this is the aspect of the fitrah, and the fitrah can be justified even academically. Even academically, read the works of Professor Bruce Hood, Professor Petrovich, Professor Bartlett and others from Oxford. They are anthropologists, and they said if you took children, even from atheist households, you put them on a desert island, they would eventually believe that God exists. You even see this in atheist communist countries. Atheist communist countries like China and Russia. Look at communist Russia. They used to have huge statues of Lenin and Stalin, and they used to almost worship them. They would have them in awe and revere them, which is an act of worship. So even in atheistic cultures, that fitrah is coming out. So we know this is true because the fitrah is dictating this, that Islam is true, that worshipping of Allah is true. So there's a fitrah aspect, there's the innate aspect. We have another aspect which is aqli, it's intellectual. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers these questions for us. We don't have to go outside of the Quran. Allah Azza wa Jalla in chapter 52 verses 35 to 36, He talks about the creation of the human being. And He says, do you think you came from nothing? You were created from nothing. Did you create yourself? Or did you create the heavens and the earth? Now this, according to the Mufassirun, those who explain the Quran, the exegetes like Ibn Kathir and others, and this is also the opinion of Dr. Jafar Idris, and Ibn Taymiyyah talks about this argument as well. This could be applied to anything that begins. The universe began, we know this now, so it can't come from nothing, it's impossible. What's 0 plus 0 plus 0? Is it 3? It's 0. Can it create itself? Can you give birth to yourself? Can your mother give birth to herself? Self-creation is a paradox, it's an impossibility. Can we have a forever chain of creation? This is impossible, so it must be an uncreated creator that exists. Very simple, key intellectual argument. So we know that Allah, the Divine, is true.
If you think this message is important and should be viewed by others, please share it. Share it to Facebook, share it to Twitter. Also be sure to like and favorite the video. By doing so, it will rise in listings and will have the opportunity to be viewed by others. Help us get the message out to the national and international stage. And also please subscribe to this channel. The truth is full of lies.